Welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. I'm Scott, host of Truth Sentinel, and I'm joined by Seth and Anthony. Today we're going to talk about general news, and also the main topic of today is topics related to superheroes. I'm going to start off.
Scott,
Sorry?
I'm sorry. Can I stop you? I'm sorry. On my computer, it's telling me that we're off air.
No, we're not. We're live.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Sorry, go on.
There's Anthony just ruined the smooth intro to the show.
Yes. Hello, Scott. How are you?
Anthony was just proving that we're actually live and we're not automatic robots or anything like that. So, yeah, let's say a quick hello to Anthony and Seth. Anyway, hi, Anthony.
Hey, how are you, Scott? How is Ukraine?
Ukraine is I'm actually really glad to be back here at the moment. It's cold after being in Thailand, but yeah, I kind of quite like being back in Lviv in Ukraine. Very nice, yeah, nice kind of cold but sunny weather at the moment.
It's a beautiful city.
It is very nice, and lots of happy memories here. And Seth, welcome to Truth Sentinel.
Glad to be back.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So we're going to be talking a little bit about superheroes today. Now, why are we going to do that? You may be asking. Well, why the hell not, I would reply. There's lots of topics related to superheroes. The ones that came up for me, just as a bit of an intro, I came across a guy in the UK whose nickname is Dr. Evil. He's a body modification doctor who helps people get pointed ears, split tongues, things like that, those horns. He's being prosecuted at the moment for things he's done to his customers, like slicing off their nipples, which kind of makes you feel a bit like, makes you wince just reading about it, but slicing off their nipples and making their ears pointed. And he's being prosecuted in a trial case, even though none of his customers have complained. It's just kind of a trial case where they're basically trying to say that he doesn't have the right to do the things he's doing, even if his customers want him to. I've kind of felt a bit sorry for him, actually, because I saw a video of him talking about it, and him and his wife are in tears. It's their profession, and I kind of do feel a bit sorry for him. Whilst I kind of I do think some of these people go too far, or at least some of the people who have the modifications go too far. I really don't think he should be prosecuted. But that's a kind of side story. The way I would link this to superheroes is the idea that people want to change themselves to be something they're not. For example, Henry Rodriguez in Venezuela, some of you may have seen that he spent thousands of pounds, tens of thousands of pounds, trying to turn himself into the Marvel comic book hero or madman, Red Skull. And you can see a picture on the link that I'll put on this video, basically.
He looks like an officer of the SS, basically, doesn't he? That's Red Skull.
Yeah, that's right. And he's got kind of horns, a red face, kind of a very devilish looking face. And he's got a kid, and there's a picture of him in the article I read with him kissing his child. And I must admit, I find it a bit odd. Like, if I was it says he's a loving father, and I don't dispute that, but that just seems like, when his kid wakes up and sees his face, he kind of sees like a demonic looking person. I don't know. I think this is just maybe my first reaction, is that as a parent, I just think you have a responsibility not to look like that, maybe. But I don't know. And I also find it weird, very strange that someone would want to go that far. I don't know. So basically, just to start off the topic, what do you think about this body modification, this guy in particular, and the guy who's being prosecuted? Any reactions? Let's ask Anthony first.
Well, I don't understand why this. I do understand why this guy is being prosecuted. It sounds to me like another situation where the law hasn't managed to grapple adequately with the issue. Because I think that, if you look at, for example, there's another guy called Stalking Cat, who's turned himself into a tiger, right?
Mm.
And some of the modifications that he's had done, if you did any of these things to somebody against their will, then it would undoubtedly be a crime. But when this guy is coming in, like fully conscious and conscious of what he's asking for, and paying money to have this done consensually, I'm not sure that it can be a crime. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there might be other. It might be useful to compare it to other examples of people doing things consensually that still constitute a crime, perhaps cult behavior or something. I don't know. But to me, like if you walk into a tattoo shop and say, like tattoo tiger stuff on my face, or you go to the more extreme guys and say, I want you to, like draw the skin on my face backwards until I resemble a tiger. That's really not the same kind of act as somebody, say, kidnapping another person, drugging them, and then messing with their face at all. So I don't know. I don't know. It seems very legally problematic to me to prosecute a person for doing to someone else what they asked for.
Well, apparently, legally, it doesn't matter if you consent to having some kind of traumatic thing happen to you. It doesn't matter if you consent according to the law. According to the law, what happens to you does matter. So if it's considered that the person who did it to you didn't have the right, it doesn't matter if you wanted it, requested it, or consented to it. This is legally. That's what's been, and this has been confirmed by an initial trial just to check on that legal aspect. So he is being sentenced soon for his crime. Yeah, I feel a bit sorry for him, but anyway, how about you, Seth? What do you think?
I think this is absolutely insane. Not the person that's performing the surgery, not the person that's having the surgeries performed upon them. As a consenting adult, there is no reason why any of these people should be convicted of a crime. I'm sorry, but as you just said, if any of these acts had been performed upon somebody against their will, they would be a crime. If you forced someone to undergo a sex change operation, that would be a crime. However, when somebody consents as an adult to have this done to them, it is not a crime. I don't have to understand or get it of why somebody wants to do these things to themselves for them to still have the right to do so. They're a grown-ass man or woman. They can make up their own minds about their own bodies. They are not hurting somebody. They are not attacking anyone. They are not, as far as I'm concerned, breaking any laws. At least not ones that matter, but of course, apparently, and I guess what is this, where this is happening there, Scott, in the United Kingdom?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, well, then apparently, thank goodness I don't live in the UK, but apparently free will is just too much, and responsibility for one's personal decisions and private decisions is just too much for individual people. I think body modification, I think all this sort of stuff of people trying to run away from who they really are is crazy. I think it's ridiculous. However, I'm not your dad. I am not your mom. I am not your authority. It's not up for me to decide whether or not you should have the right to make your own decisions as a legal adult.
Yeah,
I think I certainly can see that some justification for there being some acts which you're not allowed to do to another person, even if they request it. But I just don't see this as being one. And I think, as I said, law. I don't see. I have this feeling that the law is just not currently equipped to really deal with this in an appropriate way. And like I'm sure that you guys will both agree with me in my thought that when the law is not equipped to deal with something in an appropriate way, then the law needs to take some time to examine itself before throwing a bunch of people in jail.
Indeed.
And so I would agree with that. But do you think there's a limit? I mean, as Seth said, I wouldn't. I think some people are going way too far with the body modification and verging on mental insanity or certainly mental issues. does society have any responsibility to stop someone turning themselves into a devil for the sake of the children or anything like that? Should we be helping this guy in any way? If we see someone has mental issues, normally people try and reach out and help, or at least hopefully they do.
Nowadays they elect him to office.
Yeah. So shouldn't someone be having a word with that guy who's turning himself into Red Skull and saying, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, they should, but at the same time, it's not up to them to legally mandate what that person should or shouldn't do with their body. I think it's crazy, but again, society deciding what they're going to do for an individual, what is in your best interest for the greater good, is always going to be a slippery slope and is always going to be dangerous. I mean, at what point does one draw the line where the wise and learned elders of the government are going to decide what you need? Because at what point, Scott, did they decide that, well, you don't take the right pills, so you need to take them now? We'll legally mandate it. You don't engage in the right activities. You're not physically active enough, so we need to legally mandate that you be more physically active. You're not, fill in the blank with whatever particular participatory sort of activity that they can come up with that they, quote unquote, decide is necessary for a normal, happy, healthy human being to thrive. When one puts one's own personal responsibility at the feet of the collective, one can't be surprised when the collective suddenly engages in gross overreach.
Indeed. And we've talked about, moving on more to the superhero aspect, we've talked about a little bit about the psychology of superheroes before. And, we discussed, I think before we talked about the reality shows where people desperately wanted to become superheroes. And certainly superheroes are everywhere in the media these days, in movies, TV series. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about the psychology of it today, good and bad. So, Anthony, I think you came across something you wanted to talk about, right?
Yeah, I had two main things I wanted to talk about. The first one was a study that was carried out at Brigham Young University in 2017. Now, I know that Brigham Young is a Mormon university headquartered in Utah, but still, I think we should try to keep an open mind if we can. Basically, this was a study about the messages children take away from superhero movies. And, these movies are, of course, full of moral issues, and the positive messages they supposedly contain are often talked up. Things like defending and protecting weak people against bullies, using your talents to help others, fighting for a cause, all that kind of stuff, right? But they're also full of violence, of course. And so this team of researchers decided to try and find out what messages actually get through to young people who are exposed to so-called superhero culture. And what they found, unfortunately, was that young children who watch superhero films pick up far more on the aggressive themes than on the pro-social themes. So these kids are generally not more likely to stand up to bullies or help other kids, for example, but they are more likely to try and solve their problems through violence. And one interesting part of the study, I think, was when kids were asked to identify their favorite superheroes and then say why these particular ones were their favorites. So only about 10% of the kids mentioned either the abilities of the superhero or the fact that they help others. So the researchers gave one comment as an example of one kid who said he liked Spider-Man because, quote, he shoots webs and he can save people, right? So that's fine. But more than 20% specifically mentioned superheroes' violent behavior. So these are comments like, I like him because he can smash and destroy everything, or I like him because he can kill. That one was about Captain America. And I think, studies like this are quite important because, as you said, this superhero culture is pretty much ubiquitous nowadays. But it's interesting to see what the researchers concluded about why the children take away the violent messages rather than the positive ones.
She says that cognitively, or sorry, the head researcher, a lady named Sarah Coyne, she says cognitively young kids aren't developed enough to see the wider moral messages in superhero movies, and I think that's true to an extent, but I don't think it's the whole story. And this is the other thing I wanted to talk about, because I think that even for adult viewers, there's a lot of negative message to take away. One thing is, if you look at what motivates the storylines of most superhero films, it's usually like a challenge to the moral order, right? And it's often actually the villains who present the challenge, not the heroes. In fact, the heroes tend to fight to preserve the status quo, which may, I don't know, that may seem like over interpretation. But if you look at the plots of these movies, especially the movies which have come out in the kind of latest wave, say the last 10 years, you see a really interesting pattern emerge. First of all, with a whole bunch of superheroes, when you think about their backgrounds, they're actually the super rich. And that's slightly troubling. I mean, Batman is the most famous one. He essentially uses his billions to carry out vigilante-style justice. So he's kind of like if Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos decided to fight crime, and then due to their wealth, whatever moral code they happen to believe in would be the moral code that society would have imposed on it, which is kind of scary if you think about it for a moment. I mean, how pleasant would life be in a society that was policed by the guy who determines the employment practices at Amazon? I mean, it's not the rosiest picture. And of course, there are others. I mean, there's an organization called Money Supermarket. They drew up an estimate a while ago of how much it would cost to put together Batman's operation, and the figure is around $700 million to set up the Batcave and buy the Batmobile and all that stuff. But Iron Man's setup and running costs are almost $2 billion. And Wonder Woman has an invisible jet. And we know from all the recent scandals surrounding the US military's disastrous F-35 fighter plane that if you want a new type of jet, you're going to pay billions for it. But I mean, those are kind of older generation superheroes, so we might think that's something from the past. But then you look at Black Panther, who runs an entire country, and that country's the only one in the world which produces a metal called vibranium, and we're told in the story it's the most valuable metal on Earth. And he's a king. So basically, this gives him access to the coffers of a nation which has a monopoly on something that's approximately, the equivalent of diamonds. So imagine if the king of a country which had the only diamonds in the world could impose his moral code on the world. I mean, that is a really scary thing to contemplate, I think. But that's what we see in these movies. And so basically, look, the people who get to dispense justice in these movies more often than not are the uber wealthy. But the main thing I wanted to mention was how in so many of these movies, the bad guys actually propose some kind of social change, and then the movie makers demonize the change they're proposing, and the superheroes have to come in and kind of make the change stop. There was a helpful list of these storylines in an article by a guy called Steve Rose, who's a film critic for Rotten Tomatoes and The Guardian. I'll just give you two examples that he listed. One is, again, Black Panther. The villain in that movie is a guy called Killmonger. And the reason why Killmonger doesn't like Black Panther is because Wakanda, Black Panther's kingdom, is, as I said, a resource-rich nation, and it just stands by and lets atrocities like slavery and colonialism and racism happen in neighboring African countries, right? So Killmonger is pissed off because Black Panther refuses to use his vast wealth to step in and help his African brothers and sisters. Now, this is something which in the real world causes people concerned with social justice to go out on the streets and, peacefully protest G8 summits and stuff like this, right? But in the movie, this guy with the concern for social justice ends up organizing an armed uprising, which is just insane. It's essentially equating concern for your fellow humans with violence and disruption of the social order. And
Well,
Black Panther has to stop it. Sorry?
I like a good revolution. I think sometimes people do have to take things into their own hands, and yeah, whilst I'm against violence and armed uprising, sometimes I just think it would be great if it happened in the UK, to be honest.
Yeah, but not only that. You know, saying like, "Why aren't you more just to your fellow man?" is not an armed uprising. The movie makers are trying to conflate two ideas: one, violent revolution, and two, concern for the plight of other people.
Well,
And
and
then
let's ask ourselves why they're doing this.
exactly.
There's definitely seems to be an interest of very vested corporate and governmental interests in movies and in film, in television, in media in general, and controlling this. And I'd say a lot of the aspects of what you're discussing, as far as how it relates to children picking up on violence in general, and you know, children picking up on the violent themes more than the social themes, definitely continues into the rest of their lives. And then also seeing as the uber rich, the ultra wealthy, the ultra powerful being appealed to as the ultimate in deciders or arbiters of justice, definitely also shows a very similar bent.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, the most, I think the most extreme example of this is in Spider-Man Homecoming. In this, you've got a villain called Vulture. And this guy, he actually mentions the quote unquote 1% in the movie, right? And part of the setup for what makes him a villain is that this guy runs a salvage firm, right? And this just gets crazier and crazier. This guy runs a salvage firm, and his firm gets contracted to help clean up New York after the Avengers basically destroyed it the last time they air quotes saved the city. So he was supposed to clean up their mess. But instead, the job was given to this kind of part private, part government conglomerate, which was CEO'd by Tony Stark, who's the, you know, the alter ego of Iron Man. So this is like a clear example in the movie of a superhero engaging in nepotism. Tony Stark is running this kind of shadowy conglomerate of people who are taking jobs away from small business people. And so Vulture's pissed off about that, right? And he starts again railing against social injustice. And guess what? It turns out if you do that, you eventually end up becoming a villain, and then Spider-Man has to come and kick your ass. So you know, it really is. I mean, if you look closely at it, this is not every superhero movie, of course, but it's disturbingly common to see the quote unquote bad guys in these films have genuine grievances, and then the superheroes just come in and go, "That's evil," and shoot stuff at them or throw stuff at them, you know. So
I had one question, Anthony. I had a brief look at the article, and it seemed to me to be saying that when they questioned the kids about the superheroes, what did you like about them or what they did, some of them said things like, "Oh, he punches people" or something like that.
That's right.
And I thought it was a bit it seemed a bit misleading to say that kids are becoming more aggressive, or that it's a negative thing, because surely that's just a fact. That's not the kids are just noticing what these people are doing. But if he's punching a bad guy, if this is about good against evil, what's so bad about the kid? What's so surprising about the kid noticing that Superman punches the villains? I just thought that would be obvious. Like, why is that a sign that the kid has picked up on, or the kids? That's not a proof that the kid's becoming more aggressive.
No,
the kid is just what's happened.
The
right?
the study did a couple of things, and so the article that I sent you and my own kind of chatting here has focused on one aspect of the study, which was the kind of survey questionnaire things. But the question that they were asked was not, what does Superman do? It was, why do you like Superman? So of all the things that Superman does, what are the ones that make you like him? And that's where
okay, well, if sticking on that subject, if there is good and evil, and Superman does punch the evil guy, I can understand why the kid thinks that's a good thing, because good's defeating evil, and so why would that be a bad thing?
Well, first of all, I think I mean, we have to go to we have to go into a different area to answer that. I actually think that I'm disagreeing with what the researchers said. in a way. They said that because of the complex, kind of moral universe which is presented, it's more difficult for younger viewers to identify the moral messages. So what they come away with is just if somebody annoys you, punch them, right? And I think that is true. I can certainly, or at least I can certainly see that being true. So it validates the idea of solving your problems with violence, which is problematic. But what I'm also saying is that if you look beyond this, what you find is even when you do cognitively mature and you are able to appreciate, the fact that there might be a kind of moral message, the moral messages are not always good.
Exactly.
They're often very worrisome. And I'll tell you what's especially worrisome is that they are taken very seriously. I mean, look, we're talking about, for example, a world in which you have something called superhero therapy, and this is not a fringe thing. This is becoming what started as a fringe thing, but it's becoming very popular now, which is where trained clinicians use superhero stories to help psychological patients recover from anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and this is becoming an increasingly conscious practice. So these stories and these characters they have seeped into the culture, I think, through kind of cultural osmosis, and I think, so I think it's fair to point out when you when you look at the stories of these people, they're quite troubling in many cases, but also on a very base level, a lot of the audience is very young, and this idea of like, okay, let's divide the world into good and evil and then punch the evil might not be the best thing for young people to have running on their hard drive as they grow up and mature.
Exactly. I think just not only do we have the aspect or the angle of not every single thing in the entire world gestalt down to good versus evil, and I'd say in the vast majority of the cases, there really is no good and evil. There is only perspective. But of course, that's not the sort of message one is promoting not only to children, but to the mental children as well, their parents in the audience, and of course, all the grown-ass men and women that are going to watch these superhero movies on a regular basis. Not to mention the fact that, as Anthony brought up, this cultural osmosis of superheroism everywhere is definitely exacerbated by things like the real life superheroes movement, which includes everything from real life vigilantes of people dressing up in outfits to go fight people to public speakers and things like this. I'd say that itself shows a detachment of people from their own empowerment of them as an individual and puts it more on a faceless authority. And that itself is a very dangerous idea. But then also when it comes to the idea of violence, of that all of your problems are solved with violence, that the guy that opposes me is a, quote, bad guy because he's on the opposite side as me or I am. And the average audience goer, especially children, identifies with the superhero. That is literally who they are trying to internalize when they are watching this stuff. And so, of course, the bad guy becomes anyone that is opposite me, opposite them, any of it. And so that itself leads to an even greater amount of not only violence, but of misunderstanding of the role of violence in the world around them, and putting itself on a pedestal to be the be-all, end-all of problem solving.
Yeah, that's right, Seth. And there's also been a lot of political analysis of superhero movies, which I wasn't going to bring up, but I will say it may not be a coincidence that we've had a 10-year wave of superhero movies almost saturating our movie screens, and we now have a president in the USA who says things like, these guys are bad hombres, and somehow still, retains the support of a percentage of the population who goes, oh, bad hombres, get the bad hombres. That's something that we didn't see 20 years ago, We had to have far more sophisticated lies.
I don't know. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. Terrorists is just a slightly more fancy language version of bad guys.
That is true. And that actually, an interesting little kind of genre of superhero movies was the superheroes versus terrorists, which happened, for example, in a couple of Iron Man movies. That was also quite disturbing, I think, because yeah, again, it's cinema trying to legitimize the objectives of governments, I think you could say.
Yep.
And connected to the good versus evil, and something Seth was just talking about, in the news today, President Macron in France has condemned anti-Semitic abuse directed towards a prominent intellectual by yellow vest protesters. And I thought that was another typical thing in politics this day, is to, if there's a group of people you don't like, just find a small band of them that are criticizing or conducting behaving in a way that you don't like, and then link them with something that everyone hates, and then you can try and affect the whole situation, which I think is also happening a lot with the MAGA hats. And yeah, I think it's instead of people engaging in proper discussion, they're just trying to link. This is why, again, I don't like labels like, truthers. Certain truthers have crazy ideas. Well, that's true, but that's certain truthers. It doesn't mean that a whole group of people or are the same. Yeah, that's just something I noticed in the news today. But let me know when you think we finished the topic of superheroes, and we'll move on to general news. There's one I want to bring up, and I think Seth's got a few as well. So
yeah, I'm done. I'm basically done. I was just interested to hear your comments on it.
Yeah. Well, my comments are the comments I've already made, really.
I think I've got a little bit to add there. That would definitely be along the lines of the infantilization of culture, which I was discussing a little bit with Anthony there before the show. I believe he sent me a link in the general discussion there about Simon Pegg talking about that, of superhero movies being part of a cultural infantilization. It really seems to be that way, and the fact that superhero movies have dominated the summer blockbuster niche for so long. But we've also seen that the vast majority of adults, especially, I mean, here in America, I don't know about you guys abroad there, but here in America, the average adult can't even hold on to a quote unquote drama or a dramatic movie anymore. They really can't. If it doesn't have explosions, if it doesn't have guys getting punched in the face, if it doesn't have guns and death and sex and speeding cars and all sorts of ridiculousness, then it just doesn't hold them. And I think that that's part of the superhero thing, because there has to be bad guys. There has to be a good guy. There has to be this kind of a very, very, very base gruel level, like childlike conflict, and a resolution that is absolutely as childlike as one could find, of bad guy does bad things, good guy hit bad guy fall down, bad guy not get up again, good guy win, yay, everyone's happy. That sort of a story arc is the absolute bottom of the barrel and does nothing to raise anyone's consciousness. People are very I don't want to say people are very robotic, but people in some cases, especially in mentally, can be very machine-like, in the sense that garbage in, garbage out. And when people are taking in informational media that is doing nothing to stimulate them to rise to the occasion, to think more deeply upon a subject, and instead everything has to distill things down to their most primal and most base, you can't really expect people to be, as a culture there, having discussions or talking about things. And instead they do what Scott was just discussing there, of broad brushing or painting anyone that dares disagree with them as dangerous, as stupid, as the bad guy. And that is very dangerous for political and social discourse.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't. The very simple good versus evil narrative doesn't really offer us many tools to grapple with the kind of moral complexities of the modern world, so to speak. I mean, while you were talking, Seth, my mind was drawn towards the situation in Syria, where you had, you know, and still have to some extent, foreign intervention from, you know, the kind of great powers, you know, the US, Turkey, Russia, etc., and all of the all of the moral ambiguities that are present in Syria, with all of the different groups who are trying to achieve their own objectives, sometimes overlapping, sometimes not, to try and understand what's going on there. And you know, in a democracy, you kind of need to factor it in. If it's a major election issue, then you know, like it kind of behooves you in a way to have some kind of opinion on it, right? But it is a very difficult issue to get your head around, and certainly good guy versus bad guy doesn't fit that situation at all. I mean, just as an example of the real world versus superhero movies, you know. But I also wanted to ask, Seth, to what extent do you think the fact that people need like guns and explosions and, you know, helicopters falling off aircraft carriers in their movies, to what extent do you think that somehow reflects the mundane nature of suburban life and the need to kind of inject something in there which breaks up the day-to-day routine? Do you think that's a factor?
A bit, but I think a lot of that is actually exacerbated by the media itself and portraying you as the individual as not good enough. It has to do with partly the idea of marketing not only goods to people, but of marketing the service of government, the service of media, entertainment, and all this to people. Of your life and life in general, real life is so boring, so mundane, when in reality it's not at all. But it's so boring. There's no explosions there. There's no like regular people doing ninjutsu and running around with machine guns, doing backflips and all this stuff everywhere, and like half-naked women jumping out of high-speed vehicles, chucking hand grenades through into helicopters that explode into a spacecraft, and just ridiculousness. That sort of stuff, I feel, is very much so foisted upon children at a very young age, and then they grow in a way that makes them feel that general life or mundane life is just mundane. It's just not good enough. And of course, like any good drug addict, they have to get a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more to meet their fix. And so thus the movies react appropriately until we're in a Fahrenheit 451 or 1984 stylized sort of a reality where the entertainment media has to be as graphic as humanly possible in order to keep an audience, or be that sexually, violently, or whatever you can think of.
Can I just say before we move on, Scott, this is one of the things that I enjoy most about our show. You remember when we started, we sort of we talked about the show very much in terms of like a media analysis and kind of skeptical media analysis, and that's what we're doing. Yay! We haven't done it for a little while. It's fun.
Well, I'm going to continue with that because something caught my eye today. This is a regular thing with the BBC now. Let me just share the screen. Hopefully you'll be able to see this in a minute before that weird kind of thing that you're seeing now. Yeah, so another article from the BBC, why so many people believe conspiracy theories. The thing I hate about these articles is that it's written by someone who hasn't really researched the topic very well and just come at it from a very silly angle, I think. As usual, they quote conspiracy theories that are either very rare, that nobody's really believes, or they take ones that people do discuss and they make it exaggerate into something that isn't really true, or oversimplify it. So we have this article here, why so many people believe conspiracy theories. And I guess originally this channel was about conspiracy theories, and still is to a certain extent. But that doesn't mean to say that I believe in all conspiracy theories, just that I like discussing them. And that doesn't mean that I don't believe in some conspiracy theories. So here, let's have a look at the article anyway first. So, did Hillary Clinton mastermind a global child trafficking ring from Washington pizzeria? No. Well, of course, you know, a lot of people are going to say the Pizzagate thing. You know, that's actually what I think sparked off the fake news thing. It was directly after that we had all this fake news meme. Now, was something weird going on in the Ping project.
The Podesta emails, or
Planet Ping Pong, or whatever it was called.
yeah, Planet Ping Pong.
Well, I did see some videos of weird goings on in there. So strange things were happening, but was it some kind of paedophile hangout? I don't know. I think although people are very quick to say that was all a load of nonsense, actually nobody really investigated that much. There was definitely, with Hillary Clinton's email, there was definitely some very weird emails amongst it, which a lot of people didn't even look at. So it was diverted away from her. Now, does she mastermind?
Wait a second, Scott. Though let me just
okay,
finish. All right, go on. Yeah, finish.
Now, Hillary Clinton masterminding a global child trafficking ring from a Washington pizzeria? No, I'd probably agree with that. Is Hillary Clinton involved with child trafficking? I've no idea, to be honest. Here we've got, did George Bush orchestrate a plot to bring down the Twin Towers and kill thousands of people? The way that's worded is kind of silly. I don't think most conspiracy theorists even believe that in that kind of way. I think most people would say there's just some huge questions to be asked about 9/11, and that possibly, when it comes to being an inside job, that possibly it was some people turned their eyes the other way because they needed something like that. That's all. But what else? Yeah, sorry, Anthony. Yeah, go ahead.
No, no, that's okay, Scott. I just wanted to say about Pizzagate. It seems to me that it's been fairly conclusively disproven, and it was a kind of fairly silly one to start with, and that's why these articles always bring it up. It's an unfortunate. It is a kind of an unfortunate chapter in kind of conspiracy law because it is so much sillier than so many of the other conspiracy theories that are out there that are absolutely worthy of discussion. But I mean, the other side of that is it kind of, in a way, you don't need Pizzagate to have had grave concerns about Hillary Clinton, and this is where I think the dark side of conspiracy theory does kind of rear its ugly head a little bit, is that there were many good reasons to consider Hillary Clinton a bad candidate, right? But now what we've got is a widespread belief that she was knocked off her perch by fake news and Russia, and like they played dirty with all this Pizzagate stuff, and quote unquote stupid people believed it. And therefore she's not president. Well, I think that's dangerous for a couple of reasons. One of them is the Democratic Party shouldn't be able to get off so easily. Like they shouldn't be able to say, well, we only lost because of the stupid stuff like Pizzagate. They lost for many, many reasons, most having nothing to do with Pizzagate. And I think it's terrible that that the conspiracy folks have given them an excuse. It is only one tiny sliver of conspiracy folks.
I don't think they did. There were some people investigating the Comet. Was it Comet Ping Pong? That's right. Yeah, there were people investigating that, and so they should. If there's when there's children involved, investigate it. Fine. Now, was it debunked? Not exactly, I would say, and I'm not saying that Comet Ping Pong. There was child trafficking going on there. All I'm saying is, no, it was not debunked. It was very quickly swept aside. And the emails, which I did read some of the Hillary Clinton, and there was some alarming things in some of the emails that was very quickly swept aside and distracted by people focusing on the Comet Ping Pong pizzeria, and there wasn't that many people in the conspiracy world who wanted to make a big thing of it. I think in some ways it was used as a diversion.
Okay, but all right. So there are what?
You're right about Hillary Clinton has plenty of things wrong with her, so they didn't really need this.
Yeah. I think look the origin of that whole story was an account which on Twitter which ostensibly belonged to a Jewish lawyer, but was actually owned by a white supremacist. Now, and it was fairly clear that there was kind of just a tiny sprinkling of truth in there, you know, some dodgy stuff in the emails, but it was so far blown out of proportion that it just, I mean, it was in the end it was silly. But the thing is, I think we should probably move on. I'm sorry to have derailed this slightly, because I think you had a wider point to make.
Yeah. I was just going to carry on reading through this. So, so it basically it starts off with Pizzagate. Then it talks about are conspiracy theories destroying democracy? No. What else?
I think we can gauge I think we can gauge the Truth Sentinel reaction to that by the laughter you just heard.
Yeah, exactly. And this kind of comment here, like these articles are usually backed up by academics, but this isn't a very academic statement here. People who believed that Bush blew up the Twin Towers were mostly Democrats. Who thought that Obama faked his own birth were mostly Republicans. It's just a stupid thing to say. So what? So people, this is such a simplistic statement. People who believe that Bush blew up the Twin Towers. What? So he had a detonator, did he, in his hands, and he went there, bang, and there it was. Nobody believes that. It's just stupid. And then we have here, here's a list of the conspiracies. The theory that the moon landings were faked has prompted detailed explanations rebutting the claims. That's actually false. And despite whether you believe the moon landings were faked or not, it's false that the questions have been rebutted. That's just
no, Scott. I have to disagree again, because
we like disagreements.
Because rebutted doesn't mean disproven. It means the people who think they happened argued back against the people who didn't.
Well done.
And I think, but
I was thinking of debunked, which people often
rebuffed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to say was, yeah, that's a really good example, because actually there have been detailed arguments on both sides, and it is a theory worth taking seriously. And so it's unfortunate that the really silly stuff like Pizzagate gets used to blacken more serious kind of theories, and I think that's really unfortunate. And I often think that elements of the truth movement just walk into door after door in this respect by saying incredibly silly things.
Yeah, and on that point, when we say the truth movement, I just think it's so wrong I think it's so wrong to find a group of people who are insane or have insane ideas, say they're the truth movement, and then assume that everyone in the truth movement's like that. Because if we do that, well, we could use the label people. We could say, well, we're all people. Hey, look, there's a person. He has a stupid idea. Therefore, all people are stupid. It's just such a stupid way of thinking. So anyway, here's the examples here. Claims that Nazi war criminal Rudolf Hess was replaced by a double in jail were debunked. So this is such a fairly rare example. I mean, yeah, I think that conspiracy theory does exist, but it's not really one of the biggies. Here's another one. Musicians Beyonce, Paul McCartney, and Avril Lavigne have all faced rumors they were replaced by clones. Now, I've never heard the Beyonce and Avril Lavigne one. The only one I've heard is Paul McCartney, and it's not about a clone. It was about there is a theory, and actually I've looked into it, and it's not. Although I don't really think it happened, it's not quite as crazy if you look into it, which a lot of conspiracy theories aren't. Some versions of claims that a shadowy group called the Illuminati, the way that's written is like the Illuminati never existed, but it seems clear that something like the Illuminati did. Called the Illuminati control the world, suggest celebrities and politicians are members. Well, that's again a bit simplistic. Anyway, to understand why we are drawn to the notion of shadowy forces controlling political events, we need to think about the psychology behind conspiracy theory. Now, this is just a regular kind of article the BBC does, and some other news outlets as well, which is basically to say that if you don't agree with the official version of events, then you're a conspiracy theorist and you're stupid. And I think it's going to the level soon where it will be illegal, or certainly they'll control what goes out so that you can't write about conspiracy theories, or you can't have anything in your article or watch any videos that give any alternative to the official event. I think that's the way things are heading.
Well, and let's be honest there, Scott. What is the official version of events, and what is a conspiracy theory? I mean, something so heinously defined as this article does, where does the line, where is it drawn? What is the official story of any particular event out there ever? And what makes it the official version? It becomes anyone that agrees with me is obviously the official sources, and this is the way it should be. But anyone that disagrees with me is a conspiracy theorist, or to put it in terms of American politics, anyone that disagrees with me must be a Russian agent. They must have been bought by Roger Stone if they disagree with me. It's completely and totally juvenile to have the BBC, anyone that works for them, talking about conspiracy theories is a goddamn joke. And let's just get that out of the way right now.
Yeah,
the
and
BBC
also,
is one of the biggest pushers of dangerous conspiracy theories that have gotten people involved in literal wars that have cost hundreds of thousands of human lives. And for them to try and arbitrarily define what is a conspiracy theory and to make fun of other people over it is a fucking joke.
Yeah. Also, I don't believe they fulfilled their responsibilities or anything like it in the lead up to and the early days of the Iraq War. For example, in respect of David Kelly, that is not a Pizzagate. That is a serious issue, and the BBC showed us how journalistic they aren't in the way they covered that issue. Although I will stick up for them a little bit with some of the other things they do apart from their news service, because I love some of their podcasts. But also, Scott, before you go on, one more thing I wanted to say. I would like to recast the sentence that said, to understand the psychology of conspiracy theories, we need, to understand the appeal of the idea that shadowy forces are controlling world events, we need to blah, blah, blah. Right. I would like to recast it as, to understand the appeal of the idea of shadowy forces controlling world events, we need to look at all the times when shadowy forces really have controlled world events.
Which is pretty much most of the time. So, yeah, I find the whole thing just stupid. Like the BBC, they used to be much better. And yeah, I agree with you. They still have, I look at the BBC for general story. I feel like some of their, for general events where the government weren't involved and things like that, they're pretty good source. But when it comes to opinion, trying to affect your opinion or people's opinions about things, they're the most biased group of people out there, and they're constant articles about what's true these days, and be careful of fake news. They are not the people to go to what's true and what's false, because I would say, they're full of bias. In fact, even in their charter, they now have to make sure that at least 50% of the aim is that at least 50% of articles will be related to women now. Now, fine, we want equality, but if you're going to have a mandate where you have to have 50% of your articles about women, you can already see it on the BBC if you start scanning through their website. It's just a bit fake in itself. It's a bit stupid. You don't have to have 50% of your articles about women. You just have it about what's happening. Otherwise you're going to be ignoring some stories. I don't know. They just annoy me most of the time, the BBC.
Well, continuing on that sort of a vibe there of fake news, and let us get nothing mixed up here. The BBC, Fox News, CNN, all of the mainstream news outlets out there, regardless of who we're talking about, are every bit as guilty of promoting fake news as any out there conspiracy theory website that you could possibly come up with. There is nothing Alex Jones has promoted that is any more conspiracy minded than anything you've seen out of the BBC or Fox News or CNN. And guess what? Alex Jones hasn't promoted stories that have led to the murders of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in literal war crimes. So sorry, but I got to keep it a little bit in context there, lest people seem to forget what we're dealing with. But continuing on the topic of fake news, Facebook now may remove anti-vaccine groups after major pressure from the pharmaceutical industry. Facebook said in a statement Thursday that it may remove, reduce, and demote anti-vaccination content on its platform in an effort to combat the spread of false information and fake news. As an outbreak of measles spreads across the United States, advertisers promoted by anti-vaccination organizations have been targeting pregnant women on Facebook. At the same time, posts are frequently shared with various Facebook groups discouraging people from vaccinating their children. Oh, Lord. Facebook says it is, quote, thinking through what the right approach for this effort might look like in a statement to Business Insider. Now there, I mean, we can keep going here and seeing the level of ridiculousness as different websites are promoting the idea that anti-vaxxers or people that are against vaccination are literal terrorists, and are trying to keep people from having a discussion on this subject at all, or sharing information back and forth, you know, having a debate, having a discussion, reaching an understanding between each other. Instead, it's become this idea that you disagree with me, you are wrong, you are fake news, you need to be shut down. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say on it. I know that we don't have completely similar views on vaccination itself, but I'm sure we do have very similar views when it comes to mandating whether or not one even has the ability to speak on a subject, and whether or not one has the ability to be wrong about a subject.
Absolutely, yeah. I think people should decide for themselves. I have a more anarchist view towards things like this. I think government shouldn't get involved in things like this. And when it comes to vaccinations, it's a bit like chemtrails. I'm not 100% decided on it, but I've heard enough to know that people have real concerns about vaccines, and certainly when it comes to yourself, of course, nobody should stick anything in your body if you haven't agreed to it. When it comes to your children, I tend to agree as well. I think whilst your child is not your property, they're in your guardianship, and I don't think the government knows best. So I would certainly say if you don't think vaccines good, you're within your rights to say no. And I don't like the argument that, well, if you don't vaccinate your child, you're endangering the rest of society. I think that's very manipulative. So, personally, I've heard enough about vaccines that I would be cautious, and I don't think I would want my kids to have them. But I could be persuaded if there was some kind of disease going around. I might be persuaded. I don't know. What do you think, Anthony?
Well, on the topic of vaccines, I will just say that I agree with you, Scott. The argument that an unvaccinated child can endanger vaccinated children has never seemed to me to make sense, because if the children are vaccinated, then they shouldn't be at risk, right?
Yeah.
Is that logical, or am I missing something there?
So
if you've got one unvaccinated child in, say, like a kindergarten, right, and all the other kids are vaccinated against disease X, right, how can this one unvaccinated child give disease X to these vaccinated kids? The only way I could see that happening is if the vaccines don't work. Or did I miss something?
No, well, your logic sounds pretty sound to me.
But
I guess I would say that if you're unvaccinated, you're going to help spread the disease until it's uncontrollable. Maybe, I don't know. Right.
But on the wider subject of censoring anti-vax views, I mean, it's often said that the best way to discredit bad ideas is to have them out in the open so they can be argued. I'm not saying that anti-vax ideas are bad, but that's what a lot of people say who are more in favor of free speech. So if we look at a topic like the Holocaust, for example, and Holocaust denial, a lot of people say this about Holocaust denial. Yes, Holocaust deniers are saying offensive things, but it's better for them to be out there so that we can defeat the ideas on their own merits or lack thereof. I don't think that's a perfect mechanism, because we know that a lot of bad ideas do propagate, right? So defeating bad ideas, because like, I think it's very optimistic to think that just because an idea is bad, it will be defeated, because it doesn't always happen. However, I think it's preferable to take that risk than to put decisions in the hands of governments, and especially, as we said in the last episode, especially in the hands of corporations like Facebook, who are not regulated, who are pretty damn clueless on ethical issues, as they've demonstrated over and over again. So for them to be even considering having a view on the vaccination issue and putting that view into practice on their platform, I think is an extreme form of hubris. And if anything, there should be legislation coming into place now to stop them from doing this kind of stuff before they completely destroy the public square.
Well, unfortunately, they have become the public square, which is one of the truly terrifying things about all of this, is that they promoted themselves originally to get all of these people upon their platform as being some sort of public commons, as being a place where everyone can get together and speak freely and all this stuff. And now they've shown their true colors, that they don't intend for that at all. But they're using the guise of protecting people from fake news, which, of course, as we literally discussed, Anthony, you covered that article, what was that, I believe, last show we did, or show before last, of Facebook literally promoting fake news stories. So I find it very unbelievable that they're going to be the people that are just suddenly going to get it right this time and are going to stop the fake news and promote the real news. It just seems very, very, very bullshit to me.
Yeah, it's fake.
And we've got a question from the chat room. It's not something I particularly like talking about, partly because I just don't know enough about it, but maybe Seth and Anthony, I know Seth probably knows more about this. The question is, why did a law get passed to make it illegal to boycott Israeli products? Why does Israel get billions each year for their security and funding for a wall for them, but America can't get the equivalent for our own border wall? We can't even get peanuts comparatively. Seth, what do you think?
I think the billions thing for the border wall and all that, I'm actually not in favor of a border wall at all. I think it's another greater waste of money. I think U.S. domestic and foreign policy would do infinitely more to reduce not only illegal immigration, but increase the positive legal immigration to this country by reducing welfare incentives for people to come over here, and also by having, a very non-interventionist foreign policy where the United States government isn't constantly overthrowing Latin American countries and then having their poor displaced peoples have to flee to come to the United States in the first place. But that's a completely separate issue. When it comes to Israel, yes, they do get billions a year, and that is, there is no excuse for it. You can't come up with any reason for it, especially in a country where Donald Trump and all these people on the quote unquote right, as they're trying to portray Trump and all these guys as, I wouldn't really consider them conservative, considering their policy towards Israel and many other countries, including Saudi Arabia, where they have no problem giving major human rights violators billions of dollars, despite claiming everything is America first, make America great, which is nothing more than a joke. It's these people throw up a facade, and then their talking heads, their individual little party ideologues will just fall in lockstep right behind them. But the anti-BDS law that was passed recently is actually very disturbing. Only one Republican senator opposed it, and that was Rand Paul, which, I mean, I've disagreed with him on all sorts of stuff, but time and time again, he's shown himself to be somebody that at least occasionally stands up for what's right. And his rationale for opposing this law was the fact that it is a complete and total crush of free speech in the United States, where the federal government has now stated that they will support state laws and states that want to prosecute people and companies that boycott Israeli products and that boycott sending shipping products and companies that ship products to Israel and that the Israeli government profits by, which is absolutely chilling to free speech and free expression in this country, and takes away one of the only means people in this nation have for expressing displeasure towards Israel. That's the thing, is it reaches a point there where they try and, we're going to combat anti-Semitism. Well, how are you going to combat anti-Semitism when the only non-violent ways that people have there to express displeasure in a government not with a religion, not with a people, not with any of this, with a government that tries to identify itself and paint itself as a religion, paint itself as a people. They're broad brush themselves as all the Jews are Israel, which is not the case at all. But you're taking away these people's ability to express displeasure with the Israeli government, to actually attempt to do something to bring about change, to force the Israeli government's hand to actually change their own domestic policy, to stop fucking murdering people every single day. And yet you can't have that anymore. And then where are people to turn to? This sort of stuff is going to lead to violent extremism. 100%, I guarantee it. Because people have only limited means to express themselves. And when you eventually pigeonhole people to a point that they have nothing to do, people stop thinking rationally. They stop thinking logically. They stop thinking peacefully. And they start thinking violently. They start thinking emotionally. And it's very dangerous.
Seth, that was brilliant. I agree 100%. I hadn't heard of this law, and it's insane. I would also just add that I think the support of both political parties for the Israeli government, regardless of what it does, is a symptom of the corrupt nature of the US political system. It's like the embargo on Cuba that went on for about 40 years longer than it should have, if indeed it should have been there in the first place. It had to happen because there was a particular group of voters in a particular part of Florida that had an inordinate amount of power, thanks to the electoral college system, thanks to lobbying groups and so on. And these tiny little interest groups again and again determine the course of US politics and in many cases geopolitics. And it's insane. It has to stop. This law is crazy. I'm a little shocked.
Yeah, and
Indeed, it's dangerous.
More cases of governments and religions using laws and pressure to try to control. And when I'm talking about religion, I'm going to move quickly to the Catholic Church, and then we should probably finish. But yeah, it was St. Valentine's Day, and I think I was reading about the Catholic Church again and how people become saints, and I've always just found it just utterly ridiculous. I'm sorry, like.
Finally, we agree on a religion-based topic. Go on.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I find I do believe in a creator, but I don't believe much in man-made religions, and Catholicism is just ridiculous. Some of the way even if you look at your own Bible, it has very little to do with Catholicism. The Pope is pretty much evil, if you ask me, and the whole system is evil, and the way that saints are chosen is so illogical and ridiculous. Literally they have to go and find 2 miracles. So basically it seems to me they decide, we need to make this geezer a saint. Quickly go and find some 2 miracles. So they just go and ask people. I think they probably go and dig people up and say, yeah, I think he prayed for me once. I had a cough, and then it went away. And miracle number 1, and then that's got to be signed off. It's just ridiculous. Sorry, I had to have a little rant there. But final comments from you guys about control and religion and the government, and then we'll be able to wrap it up for today.
Okay. I had a couple more to cover, but we can go on those another time here. I'd say, honestly, Catholicism, imagine of what we were just discussing with the anti-BDS law and everything. Imagine if criticism of the Vatican or of Catholicism in general was made illegal in any particular country there, that it was called, you, instead of anti-Semite, we'll come up with some new term, you anti-Latinite or anti-Latite or something like that. They'll come up with that, smear it on you, put it as a new insult. And now all of a sudden you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a xenophobe, you're a zealot. And thus you're silenced, you're stifled, you're put in a box, in some cases, quite literally, for an opinion, for wrong think. It's a very dangerous precedent. Next time we do something here for news, I mean, we have that Jussie Smollett case, which is very interesting, of people orchestrating attacks against themselves and blaming it on a political opposition group, which in this case was attempting to paint Make America Great Again people and the Trump supporters and all this as racist, violent attackers of a guy named Jesse Smollett, who actually the people that ended up supposedly doing this to him were contacted by him, and that these are both Black Nigerian individuals who he contacted to get to do this to him. At least that's what the police are saying right now, which is very interesting, especially considering that the mainstream media had already picked it up and already run with it within minutes, with no skepticism, anything, because everyone just has to believe, grab the information exactly from whatever source and have no skepticism at all. It shows the complete and total lack of media accountability and just media scruples in this country in general. And then finally here, this isn't really a big article or anything like that. It's just a question for either of you. How many animals would you say are killed for food every day? Both of you, just wondering if you had to guess.
I'm not going to answer because you already told me, and I've actually forgotten. But I know it was, I know it was a lot. Anthony,
It's got to be in the tens of billions.
and I would say trillions, but then I've cheated because.
Every single day, when it comes to land animals, about 150 million. You're looking at about 3 billion a day if you include wild and farmed fish.
Oh my God.
In a year, you're looking at a little, if you extrapolate the numbers from there, about 3 billion a day, you're looking at I believe, 1.09 trillion animals killed for food every single year. This is not for sport. This is not for from ecological devastation, from people just unintended consequences of impact of deforestation or anything like that. This is literally just being killed for food. Just thought that was a very interesting statistic to share with people and to put into the thought process there. Sustainable. Yeah.
Maybe we could. I'd be totally up for doing a show about vegetarianism or those kind of topics at some point. Because I'm not a vegetarian, but I do feel like we're moving into an era where there is an option not to eat, not to have this huge scale of slaughter. I think there's a lot of other options now, and I'd certainly be prepared to switch, at least cut down significantly, or even stop eating meat altogether. But I haven't done so yet. Anthony?
Yeah, I would also be interested in that kind of an episode. I think it's a fascinating topic, and we definitely should talk about it. On the note of canonization, I have just a couple of things to say. First of all, Pope Pius XII canonized Pope Pius X. Pope Pius X was the Pope during the Second World War, during which the Catholic Church cozied up to Mussolini, the Croatian Ustashi, fascist murderers, and arguably the Nazis. The two miracle requirement was waived for Mother Teresa because she was a celebrity, and Pope John Paul II, one of his miracles was supposedly to touch a woman and then have her healed from Parkinson's disease. Wow. So the whole thing is just ridiculous.
It's absolutely ridiculous, and there's a lot of illogical things about the Pope, and I just find it with the amount of pedophilia that has gone on in the Catholic Church, I find it slightly disturbing that people let their kids run up to priests and even the Pope as well, because I think the previous Pope has resigned basically because there was some child abuse scandal that was going to come up about him, and I certainly I don't buy into the fact this Pope is a nice guy. I think he's as dodgy as they come as well. So anyway, on that bombshell, let's finish today. And thank you, Seth and Anthony, for joining us. And hope you'll join me again in a week or two for another episode.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you for having me on here. It's great to talk to you guys as always.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Scott. Thanks. And thanks, Seth. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And thank you for joining us in the chat room. Death Path 1, thanks for your question. Sorry that we can't answer all of them, but we did touch on some of them.
Great question, by the way.
Yeah.
Really, really almost worth an episode on its own.
Yeah, sure. And so I would like to encourage any other listeners that listen to the recording of this to come and join us. I think the episodes are going to be about 4 o'clock GMT, usually happen on a Sunday, either weekly or fortnightly. So come and join us. We'd love to have more interaction with our audience. So there's an invitation for you. Thanks very much, everyone, and goodbye.
Bye.